I'm Matt.
I'm Shane.
And if you like what you hear, make sure you hit that thumbs up button real hard, and make sure you subscribe to Comic Movie Marks.
And also click that little bell for all of the notifications.
Whee!
Always remember,
If Trailer Trash can do it,
anyone can do it.
I never thought my cut would see the light of day, and maybe rightly so. You know, the picture came out, it was what it was. It wasn't the original director's cut, but it was a fellow, I forget his name on purpose, who took over. It was 25 years ago. And then one day Michael Thor called me and said, listen, there really is a internet movement afoot that they want to see your cut. I said, I wouldn't know where to start. He said, well, I'd love to do it. I said, hey, of all the people, you're the right guy, go do it. And then he told me the studio was cooperating and that they were going to do it, and it was exciting for me.
hello and welcome everyone to another Comic Movie Marks video.
We have a very special episode today. We are going to discuss Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. And we're going to talk about all of the history, everything that led up to it, and why Richard Donner had to release his own version 25 years later.
Yeah, definitely. So we've been teasing this out on Vero and on our other social media aspects. The Donner cut, what's the story on the Donner cut? What does it really mean in the overall atmosphere that we're in nowadays compared to something else that people have been pining for, the Snyder Cut? Is there a correlation between the two? Does it happen to be a coincidence that WB was producing both these movies and both directors left abruptly in the middle of production? Is there a coincidence in this? Is it the same? We'll find out right about now.
Rang the doorbell, no answer, went around the side of the house, and there's Dick on the lawn, dressed in the Superman suit.
And I came running across the lawn with a cape on, and Tom said, whatever you're in, I'm on. It's it. Or whatever you're on, I'm in.
And he said to me, put it on, just put the suit on. If you put the suit on, you'll do it. You feel different with the suit on. I started laughing, and we sat down and started talking.
So before we get started, we wanted to send a quick thank you to all of our followers, all of our fans who have been patiently waiting. We know sometimes it takes us a little bit longer to produce some of our videos, but we wanted to make sure we had everything squared away. I know a lot of times our show does not come across all that organized because it's not for the most part, but
it's organized to us, damn it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's real to me, damn it.
So we want to make sure we had all of our ducks in a row and we had everything out there. So thank you so much for patiently waiting. We know that there was probably a little bit of gap there with our videos coming out. So thank you. And we hope that it is worth it.
You serious?
All right, so we're going to start from the very beginning. The Salkinds, I think I keep wanting to say Salkinds, is off to a great start. The Salkinds, which is a father and son duo of producers, they bought the TV and film rights to Superman in 1974. They owned those rights for about 25 years before selling to Canon Films in 1984. So obviously they only made it about 10 years before they said, fuck this shit, and moved on. And then eventually WB retained the full rights in 1993. Now, even though the Salkinds had the rights, it was still distributed by Warner Brothers.
And then eventually John Peters picked up those rights in 1997 and tried to make Superman Lives. Small little addition there.
Yes, exactly. So then...
well, fuck you. Trying to add a little bit to it.
Yeah, that's perfect. So it's intriguing when you kind of start digging into this stuff, how the rights just kind of float around. So even though Warner Brothers now holds the rights to distribute Superman, and obviously there's the DC Entertainment department, if you will, of Warner Brothers, that Warner Brothers has still continued to be the parent company for quite some time. So in 1977, Richard Donner began simultaneously filming Superman 1 and 2, both set for a release date of 1978. So Superman 1 was supposed to be released beginning of 1978, Superman 2 the end of 1978. And a lot of people, from my research, I guess, were kind of confused about simultaneously, even when I'm reading comments on other videos and such. Simultaneously means they were literally filming all of the scenes at the same time. So if there was the Daily Planet scenes, they filmed them all for both Superman 1 and 2, where they filmed them as pretty much like a to be continued, like a small serial, instead of one film, one film, one film.
Superman 1 and 2 were shot simultaneously, not back to back, and Dick was working off of an enormous script. And so when they were in the Daily Planet set, Donner shot out all his scenes from Superman 1 and then shot out scenes from Superman 2. So think about just keeping track of continuity between the two films.
Like you were saying before, but if they're in the Fortress of Solitude, they try to film everything in the Fortress of Solitude so they don't have to go back there. And they could just move on to the next set. So that's a very big issue with trying to keep track of what the hell have you recorded at this point. It could delay things. It could make things a little bit more difficult. But because of this situation, they had to fast track Superman 1 a little bit. They mainly had to focus on Superman 1 and postpone work on Superman 2 temporarily.
As an old-time production person, I personally didn't think it was a very good idea trying to shoot two films at the same time. I personally think it's better to concentrate on one film, make that, and then go on and do the second film, and using some of the resources that you'd used in one. Whereas they felt it was easier to shoot the scenes from 1 and 2 in the same place at the same time. And in the end, you get yourself into a bit of a bugger's muddle doing that.
It was a continuing saga, the way Tom and I looked at it, that if you're doing 1, hell, just as easy to do 2, it's just that much more footage. 1 would lead into 2, and for those that didn't see 1, we would have a prequel. It presented production problems, but actually we were smart enough to do was every time we had a set, like Fortress of Solitude, we try to do everything in that for both pictures. So once you were done with that set and those actors, you were done. You never had to go back. So in that way, we did 1 and 2 together.
The budget was getting a little out of control. The timeline was getting out of control. And I think this was the starting point, essentially, to the Salkinds and Donner kind of, you know, going head to head. Superman 2 eventually was released in 1980. That was after pretty much the entire shit show that we are going to continue to discuss.
Army Archer, the Variety columnist, was there. And we started chatting, and he said, so I hear there was tension between you and Donner. And I said, yeah, there was, it's true. Army called Donner and says, oh, so I spoke with Pierre Spengler, and apparently now all is forgotten, and you're going to go do Superman 2 together. To which Donner said, well, if he's on it, I'm not. And that was published, actually. You can look in the Variety. If you look around the end of the year of 78, that's where it was. It created the atmosphere and the tension for us, and by us I mean the Salkinds and I, and the Salkinds are very loyal people, had been there from the outset, and if the gentleman didn't want to work with me, then we had to find someone to replace the gentleman.
So as you heard there in the video with Spengler, there's tension already between him and Donner, and basically it was printed in Variety that if Spengler's there, he won't be there. So it already started this tension between that producer and Donner. And well, and as he says there, they're very faithful. They're very loyal to people that are their friends. And so he was basically saying that if they don't want to work with him, then they're going to have to find somebody else. And that was kind of the eventual downfall of this situation.
So as you can tell, a lot of similarities between the Donner Cut and Zack Snyder and everything that was going on with him. And there's a difference in their vision and what the Salkinds wanted versus what Donner wanted. Donner was known for doing The Omen before coming on to do Superman, and he wanted to do the film in a very specific way. And obviously, a lot of stuff kind of is they're already button heads. Superman 1's not even released yet, and they're already button heads.
God rest his soul, my father, Alexander Salkin, was breathing very hard on my neck. And I would go on the set. I would just stand there to, put more pressure. But it was horrible.
It got so bad, I couldn't talk to them. I couldn't stand the sight of them, quite honestly. And I just, stay away from me. Stay off the goddamn set.
I'm sure I came up with the idea there that I said, well, why don't we hire Lester, who we have a very good friendship with Musketeers, and actually I think we even considered him at one point to direct it, because he will be like another producer, and being a director, okay, let's face the worst. If everything really goes bad, perhaps he can take over.
He came on the set one day and he said, Dick, he introduced, and I said, listen, he said, I'm here to be a go-between. Nothing more than if you have something to say to them, say it to me and I'll tell them. If they have something to say to you, they'll tell me. He said, I'll help you any way I can if you need me. I said, look, I don't need you in the process of making the film, but that's great because I really don't want to be involved with these people.
So as you hear in that video, one of the Salkins, the younger one, the son, was standing on set, putting pressure on Donner. Very familiar from what we heard with the Snyder Cut, where they had producers like John Berg on set watching everything Snyder did. Very, very similar situation there. And then they even brought in Richard Lester. Another familiar thing where Jeff Johns brought in Joss Whedon, and he was supposed to be a writer to help with some pickups, right? We remember all hearing that. Yep. And this time, though, Lester, was kind of this medium between the two, between the producers and the director, Donner. And it kind of makes you wonder, in some sense, maybe was Whedon that middleman between Snyder and maybe certain producers like Jeff Johns?
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting. The correlation is deep and heavy there.
History repeating itself. Yeah, as Matt said, Lester was brought on as a co-producer and a mediator between the Salkins and Donner. Eventually Superman 1 was released. It did incredibly well in the box office, so now they're really trying to fast track and try to get everything under control with Superman 2. Due to the film going over budget and over schedule, there's a long gap of pretty much no one really talking to each other. And then in 1989, Donner told Starlog magazine that the Salkins, for whatever reason, chose not to bring me back. After I waited to hear for 6 or 8 weeks, I got a telegram kind of made me laugh, that said, your services are no longer needed.
I said, we got to take another director. And it was an incredibly difficult, crazy decision.
One came out, and I had my obligation to go back and finish 2. I mean, I was ready to go, and I get a telegram one day. It says, your services will no longer be needed. Richard Lester was taking over the film. I never, to this day, ever heard from Richard Lester. I was so pissed off.
We just got a letter. 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 Wonder who it's from.
Fucking bullshit!
So Donner did leave the project on March 15th, 1979. He basically stepped away from it, but his plan ultimately was to come back and finish it. And when you listen to him talk about how many that him and Tom Mankiewicz, which was like his creative consultant, he was also a writer on both Superman 1 and Donner's cut of Superman 2. They wanted to do Superman 5. And they had all these ideas, all these plans of what they wanted to do and how they wanted to take it, and to be very critical with the character and to make sure that they did it justice.
And I wanted to go back, and Tom and I wanted to go back, and Tom and I had in our minds the completion of 2. We had a great idea for if 2 went well, we could do 3, and if we did anything, we could do 4. But as I say, they chose to send me this telegram. I was ready to get on an airplane and kill, because they were taking my baby away from me. But it's showbiz, and I managed to get through it.
Another very similar thing. We got a 4 to 5 movie arc planned out by the director. And yeah, he had maybe different ideas, but this was his big arc. And how Superman 1 and 2 were shot simultaneously. Yes, they were shot in a way where everything was done at the same time, but kind of similar to what we were hearing at one point about how Justice League Part 1 and Part 2 were going to be. How they were going to be shot back to back as one continuous story. So again, another correlation. One big 4 to 5 movie arc. Sound familiar? We just found out recently Snyder wanted to have about a 5 movie arc, a serial as it would be. Even Donner describes his series as a serial, just like a comic book. Like the correlation here is insane. It's incredible to hear. And again, because of what producers and higher ups influence on the situation, those ideas ultimately went down the shitter.
And another kind of intriguing thing, Tom does talk about that he wanted to that Donner's directive that Tom Mankiewicz wanted to maintain was a more realistic and less campy type approach, with, you know, kind of sprinkling in a little bit of camp in there, but they didn't want it to be just jokes on jokes, which is very intriguing. So once new word gets around that Donner is no longer returning, Tom says, fuck you guys, I'm not coming back either. Gene Hackman decides I'm out of here as well. And one that I did not know, John Williams did not score the theatrical release of Superman 2. I don't have the other guy's name, but he eventually left. And I do remember when Superman 3 came out, it was not John Williams that scored that film, but they were able to change up John Williams' score, and I believe they owned the Superman theme, Warner Brothers, at that point, that they could utilize that, and they just changed it so it has essentially the same theme, but with a little bit different tune, I guess.
Again, Tom Holkenberg, Junkie XL, he was fired, unfortunately, but again, switching composers for the film, tweaking up existing music already, like what they did with the Wonder Woman theme. They changed it from like a more guitar riff to a orchestral type version. Again, it's kind of interesting how history also keeps repeating itself throughout this whole scene. You know, Donner was talking about coming back, that he was ready to come back, and that they already paid him basically for doing 1 and 2. So he already was paid very, very well for his work, but he never got to come back. And I think that's just a sad thing, that how the Socklins and other producers in WB handled this situation. They did so many things here that were quite ridiculous. And Margot Kidder is one of the most outspoken actresses from this movie. And she felt that it was a complete stab in the back, and that they did things that were just deplorable.
So they fired Donner, which was just such a horrifying thing to do that even now, 30 years later, I find it shocking. So we as actors felt that on some level we'd been hung out to dry. At least I did. Christopher didn't as much. At that point, he was very aware of the politics of movie making and who you were nice to, something I never grasped.
And she even has a quote. There's a whole other Superman 2 in the vault somewhere, with scenes of Chris and me that have never seen the light of day. It's far better than the one that was released. It's crazy how this sounds. I've seen a lot of people actually make jokes that are anti-Snyder Cut people saying, what, you think there's some movie in a vault somewhere? And it's just so funny that she says there's a whole other Superman 2 in a vault somewhere.
Yep, exactly. And we're about to get into kind of more of WB vaults and how eventually the restoration process began. But before that, basically, when filming was halted to complete Superman 1, Donner had pretty much filmed all the main character scenes. There was a couple things that he needed to wrap up, that he wanted to make sure that he filmed, but he did film everything that had to do with Marlon Brando. He filmed everything that had to do with Gene Hackman. Pretty much most of the main character scenes were done. Something to note, worth noting, the Salkins did not want to bring back Marlon Brando due to his 11.75% gross of the U.S. box office, which I found that pretty intriguing. So basically, Donner's whole interpretation of this is that the Salkins were saying, "Oh, you're way over budget. We need to rein this in. So we're not gonna have Marlon Brando. We need to, cut some scenes down."
The economics were such as to say, well, do we really need Brando in this? because he was extremely expensive. And we then said, well, economically, that doesn't quite make sense.
And eventually Donner says, well, this is just bullshit, because now you're sacrificing a film, a solid film, to save a couple bucks. And he, if you listen to his commentary, he says that several times throughout the commentary.
From what I've gathered on my research, most websites give the credit of about 70 to 75% of Superman 2 was already filmed by Donner before they stopped on Superman 2 to move to Superman 1. So when you look at that movie, the Donner cut, there's about 70 to 75% of the film is his, for the most part. Unfortunately, because of the situation, he had to use some of the Lester scenes, but we'll get more into that later.
Restoration process begins is in 2001, they were going to re-release Superman the movie on DVD with a bunch of additional footage. And through that, they started kind of scrummaging through, literally, WB vaults that I guess are located in England. Soon after, Warner Brothers approached Donner to do an extended cut, I believe, of Superman 1. And initially, Donner was kind of like, nah, I don't know if I want to do this. So this,
go fuck yourself.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's kind of what starts to get the ball rolling. They go through, if you watch some of the behind the scenes, very interesting. They have to dust off all these different reels. They have to kind of piece it together. I highly recommend. We won't do it justice. Go back, and if you haven't seen the Donner cut, obviously see that. And watch some of the bonus scenes. It's very intriguing to how they have to piece everything together. There's different reels for sound that they have to try to match up, and Donner has to go, yeah, I think that's how it was. So just very interesting.
Yeah, discussion about the lost Donner footage raged for years, and with the advent of the internet, numerous letter writing and other campaigns were instigated to persuade Warner Brothers to allow Richard Donner to create his version of Superman 2 in 2004. A fan-restored DVD known as Superman 2 Restored International Cut was released through Superman fan sites. It featured extended scenes shown in various television broadcasts over the years and helped bring much publicity to the cause when Warner Bros. Threatened legal action over the bootleg release. Very interesting. Because of Warner Brothers' actions of getting pissed about this kind of restored cut, because over years, small scenes of Donner's cut would get leaked out, pictures and so forth, things people would see. Over the years, ABC and others would rebroadcast the movie, and there's tons of different endings to the movie. I recently just found one where there is like snow police that arrest Lex Luthor, and that was in like this ABC version of the direct cut. You don't see that in the Donner cut or the original theatrical cut. This shit is almost like Blade Runner, where there's like 15 different versions.
Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder what they were thinking to have like the actual ending. Very interesting. But that's some of in my research, that was some of the most entertaining things that I found, and I guess the most inspirational was the stuff that talked about how the Richard Donner cut started gaining momentum. All these fan sites pretty much, come together, and a couple that I found in my research, capewonder.com, supermancinema.co.uk, and theforbiddenzone.com. Some of these no longer exist. They didn't keep their domain, I guess, registered. Didn't continue to pay on that. But it's pretty cool. The Forbidden Zone has an awesome website if you want to check it out.
I wouldn't go as far as awesome, but it was functional.
Okay, functional.
You could tell it was made in 2005.
Yes, I think it's awesome just because of what it includes. So there's a campaign down at the bottom, which is something that a lot of people, there's been a Release the Snyder Cut campaign continually, which is why we decided, along with the 5th anniversary of the Man of Steel, that we did our watch along or commentary, if you will, of the Man of Steel, because of the Release the Snyder Cut campaign. So the ForbiddenZone.com, they have a campaign on June 19th that they're doing. They want to send letters, to send emails, and they even have the addresses to send your letters to. And they wanted to do it specifically June 19th, 2004. They have Barry Meyer, Alan Horn, and president of Warner Home Video, Jim Cardwell.
Download sample letter.
Yeah, it's just, I thought that was very interesting, very well put together.
So if you want the Snyder Cut, email these motherfuckers. They get shit done.
Good luck with that.
I have no idea if they're one's probably dead, I'm assuming. Cocaine.
Yeah.
Cocaine's definitely a cause of death on one of these guys.
Yes.
And then two
guaranteed.
of them, one's probably a janitor now, and one's probably still there. So you got a chance.
Yeah, possibly Jim Cardwell. So some of them actually got a response from the president, Jim Cardwell, stating Warner Home Video is supportive of an extended version of Superman 2 on DVD. However, there are complex legal issues that need to be resolved before the film can be re-released. Warner Home Video is presently addressing those issues.
The person that owns the website actually says, this sounds very positive. I knew there were all sorts of issues surrounding the Donner version, and it's wonderful to hear that they are addressing them. I think this helps them realize that it will definitely be worth the effort. Man, Warner Brothers, just go back 13 years and look at how you guys handled this then. It shows confidence in the situation, but no, you want to hide and not say a goddamn word.
You know, a lot of people ask why. Why treat the customer this way? Why? Because fuck them, that's why.
One little sticking point of the whole thing is that although Donner had already completed 75% of Superman 2, Lester scrapped most of the footage and started over, possibly because he needed to direct at least half the film in order to receive screen credit.
I never thought I would ever see my cut of the second one. When they finished the second one, they had to, by director's agreement, show it to me and give me the option of having my name on it. And I saw it and I said, didn't want my name on it because it had become a parody on a parody. It had become a joke on a joke, which we had tried very hard to eliminate, in my mind. And so I took my name off, and I figured that's it. You know, that's going to go out there, and I'll never see mine.
In that video, Donner talks about a director's agreement, and that did he want to be credited on the film after he watched it. If we listen actually to the commentary on Superman 2, the Donner Cut, he actually talks about he only made it to the Eiffel Tower scene before he just said no.
We have to talk about this at some point. I don't know. Was Richard Lester under an obligation to shoot a certain percentage of the film as original material in order to get his name on it as director? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I remember he called you at one point and asked if you'd like to share credit, and you said no.
No,
I don't
he didn't
do
call.
that. Oh, he didn't call?
No, somebody called and said, would you like your name on it? And that's when I said, well, let me see it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I got as far as that, now I remember, the Eiffel Tower and that whole open.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, forget it.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't like obligated necessarily to watch the whole film. They didn't have to go Clockwork Orange and hold his eyes open and make him watch the whole film before he could say anything. Obviously, there was a certain percentage of the movie that was done. And I think this was kind of like their halfway agreement in some sense to be like, okay, well, technically Lester can take the credit for this, but do you want to have shared credit for the scenes that you did do? And I think ultimately because it wasn't his vision, it wasn't how he wanted to do it, he said no. So Lester got sole credit on the situation.
Yeah.
Now, the comparison to Snyder in this situation when it comes to Justice League and Whedon is, I think what people kind of gloss over a little bit is that Whedon got a writing credit. He was officially credited as a writer on the movie. Him and Chris Terrio are co-writers. What he did was add several scenes of dialogue, for the most part, with small scenes. So he added enough dialogue to the movie to get himself a writing credit. So I think what the big difference is Snyder had all these shots already done. And because of the technology we have these days, you could just move the characters into shots that Snyder has already done and just change the dialogue of the situation. That's all you got to do. So it's still shot scenes by Snyder, so he gets the director's credit, but the dialogue is changed enough that Whedon gets the writer's credit. And I think that's the big difference there. That's the big, big difference, because Lester took a movie and completely overhauled it.
The result is that we didn't use what didn't fit. We worked around what was there. But, of course, we had to invent new things because it wasn't the same picture.
It sounds very familiar, but I think they did even a bigger overhaul of the situation. And even another video here we have of Margot Kidder talking about how he changed the situations between her and Christopher Reeves.
A horrifying thing to do, and you can't put Richard Lester's name on as director because the director has to have directed more than half of the movie, and you can't just reshoot your old scenes. You have to have different scenes. So they hastily rewrote a lot of scenes with Chris and I and threw out this Superman 2 that we'd worked with such love.
So again, that's the big difference. Joss Whedon got a writer's credit.
It does make me wonder how much more Joss Whedon had to do, because as we had talked about, it feels like the entire third act, so a whole third of the movie, is all Joss Whedon. But as you said, you know, maybe it's just they're the same scenes, but they reshot Superman a different way. He, you know, whatever, changed Steppenwolf. They removed. They have the one spot where, you know, Wonder Woman drops down and has Aquaman and whoever it is, Cyborg, I guess, behind her. And then in the theatrical, it's changed. It's different. You know, he changed the coloration, shot the intro scene. So he did a lot, but it makes me wonder what more he had to do to actually receive a full director's credit for that. And obviously, Zack Snyder has said, no, I have not even watched this. So he wasn't even given the opportunity of, hey, do you want to give Joss Whedon, or, you know, do you want partial credit on this or whatever?
Because I think his scenes were intact for the most part. Some of the backgrounds and some of the setups are still there. The with Clark Kent and Lois Lane on the farm, it's still there, but then it's cut short and altered slightly with dialogue. Again, the Superman fight, cut short, altered with dialogue. The Steppenwolf fight, again, cut short, altered with dialogue. It's small little aspects like that that are just cut short. And as we've seen recently with some leaked VFX stuff that's been coming out, I mean, they drastically cut things down. So now the percentage of how much film he would actually have to do with a 2-hour cut is he would have to have an hour worth of fucking footage. And there's no way he does. There's no way he actually did an hour worth of reshoots. It's just a bunch of dialogue changes. The scenes are still somewhat Snyder in the background, but in the foreground, it's Whedon.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing. If it was a longer movie, I think we'd be running into a different situation. And that might lead to a conspiracy of why they did a 2-hour cut.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. A big difference. Richard Lester did splice... Dick Lester, he did splice together some scenes as well in the original Superman 2 that Richard Donner had shot. He changed some coloration. There in the commentary, Richard Donner talks about how Michael Tao, who was pretty much the producer who kind of brought the Richard Donner cut to life, Michael had to go through and change certain things that, you know, were supposed to be nighttime that Lester changed to day. So the theatrical release of Superman 2, there's a scene where Gene Hackman, Lex Luthor, and his assistant, the person who broke him out, I forget her name, they're floating in a balloon together, and it should be nighttime. Richard Donner wanted it to be nighttime. Well, Lester changed it to be shot in day, essentially. You know, Michael Tao had to go back through and readjust that.
Which now looks completely stupid, because now there's just this giant balloon floating up in the day, which should be very obvious to anybody with 2 fucking eyes.
Right.
If it's at night, at least it's kind of in the shadows. You know, it's dark. It's harder to see in a distance. But when you have a giant air balloon in the daytime, it should be pretty freaking obvious that it's there.
Yeah.
So again, just dumb changes.
Exactly. And as we saw, as Matt just spoke about, the VFX, things that are coming out, it seems like the Superman Justice League battle was supposed to happen closer to night or at night. It's kind of hard to tell from some of the stuff that has been released. And then obviously Joss Whedon made it seem like it's more dusk, I guess. So just more very interesting stuff. So as I talked about, Michael Tao and Richard Donner got together in 2005 and started to kind of bring it all together. They had to dust off some scenes and try to literally cut everything together. Like when you go through and you watch the behind the scenes, they're cutting things and trying to figure out where the sound goes, and it was very, very interesting to kind of watch. And then eventually the world premiere was released November 2006 at the Directors Guild of America building.
We hear a lot of things here about with Donner, about how he felt about the cut, how he felt about the situation he was put in, and how he felt about his movie in general. There is a lot of incomplete scenes that he was not able to do.
But of course, so much of it was never shot. And so many of our scenes that I had shot and that they had thrown out, we put back in. But so to answer your question, I never thought it would happen. I was thrilled it did. Probably almost more thrilled than, a little more thrilling to me than the original, because this thing had been laying in cans, as you say, in England for 25 years.
Doing this edit was actually a little tough on him because he sees the scenes that he wants and there's some incomplete shots that he wasn't able to do. So it's not really exactly his film. Like we said before, some of the shots that Lester put in the movie are still there because it had to make the story make sense.
When we did find the footage, and it took months and months and months, Dick came over and saw all the scenes. He also didn't want to deal too much with the Lester scenes that needed to be left in to make a complete story. But I realized after a while that he had been familiar with those scenes, and they hurt him, I think. That was always a sore spot.
I've looked at it a couple times. I've given my input as best I can, but I can't do it anymore. I can't divorce myself from the disparagement of time, whereas he can, because he's going in fresh and it's new, and he's doing a wonderful job. It's tough to look at.
So if you want to see all of the changes, there's a website. We'll actually include the link in the description of this video, and the website is movie-censorship.com. And there we'll provide the link, as I said, and they go through literally every difference with the movie. And one of the funniest things is, I don't know how often most of you watch Superman 2, but I remembered right when Donner is talking about that, as far as he made it was the Eiffel Tower scene. And as I'm like listening to that, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's literally the beginning of the movie. And I verified it with this movie-censorship.com, and yeah, it is pretty much the beginning of the movie. They go through kind of the introduction, and then the way that both of the movies play out is they kind of do like a revisiting, like last time on Superman 1, like that kind of thing, and they revisit what happened in Superman 1, and then they go into the introduction scene, and I like the Donner version much better, but in the Lester version, it's the Eiffel Tower scene. Donner's version is Lois Lane saying, I'm so confident that you're Superman, I'm going to throw myself out the window, and you're going to save me. And then he has to creatively try to save her without revealing that he is Superman. So very interesting. And then as Matt had talked about, Donner in the commentary, he thanks fans, for continually asking for the film, for the push to get it to where it was, so eventually they can recut it. But however, they had to include some scenes that were not shot by Donner, and I guess this was per the request of Warner Brothers, that in order to make a cohesive story, he obviously only finished 75% of the film. They had to use some of Lester's scenes, which he points out in his commentary. One of them, the most important one, that he didn't have to reuse, but that he didn't get to shoot. He used the initial screen test with Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve and spliced together each of their screen tests of this very important scene to make a scene. So as I've talked about this in some of our different videos, but Christopher Reeve's hair changes length and everything like that because it's different screen tests to kind of get the chemistry, which I think is awesome. If that's their screen test and they have that type of chemistry on film, that's pretty impressive. So he splices it together.
Things to look at, and that is the scenes I wanted to shoot that they wouldn't let me, or they moved on, or they decided to shoot. Perfect example for me is there's a scene I didn't shoot except for the screen test. I thought it was so important that I used it as the screen test for Lois and Clark. And that was a scene where they go to Niagara Falls on this assignment, and what we had, and I only have it on the screen test, was they get to this hotel room and they decide to go out that night, and he knocks on the door and he comes in and she pulls a gun out of the drawer. He said, Lois, what are you doing? She said, I'm betting your life that you're Superman. She points a gun at him and fires. And Chris transforms. The glasses come off, and it's Superman. And that was the tip. I mean, that broke the whole thing. It was beautiful.
Or even in the commentary, he talks about the vision of a director and how Lester shot things compared to how he would shoot things. And it's very fascinating when you hear him, how he talks about it.
Every director, thank goodness, sees a film differently. I've been very fortunate in my life. I've been able to pick up a script, read it, and for some insane reason can go out and shoot it tomorrow. I see it. And Richard Lester was brought in by the producers to replace me, and he saw the film different than I did. So he shot footage that had to be included in 2 just to keep the continuity. It was different than the way I would have shot it. There was something about being involved with Christopher and Margot and Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman and Ned Beatty, and I mean this whole cast, and being there with Tom Mankiewicz and writing it every day as we went along, and we were all kind of emotionally involved and emotionally charged by it, and we there's the word I keep using all the time, verisimilitude. We all had our great sense of reality, and so I felt that because this director didn't have the opportunity to be involved with all these people, and Tom Mankiewicz the way I was, that he kind of reverted back to, in my eyes, the face value of the comic book rather than the heart.
Again, another comparison to the Snyder Whedon situation. It's like how Whedon would see things at maybe only face value. And that's why we got kind of like these nostalgic things.
Yeah, I like it. very, very well put.
And that's why we got the things the way we did, compared to where a Snyder version might be a little bit more deeper and a little bit more serious than what we got. It's very similar. Again, it's crazy how similar Donner's situation is to Snyder's.
Yeah, a couple other similarities. Richard Donner actually intended 1 and 2 to be more serious as he kind of established the characters. And then as the movies went on, he wanted to have a little bit more fun with them, as did his creative consultant, Tom. They wanted them to be, eventually kind of more serious, more well-grounded, and then eventually kind of, I guess, a little bit more campy as things continued. Another thing that I thought was very fascinating, Donner talks about that once he kind of stepped away from Superman 2 and, his relationship had soured with the Salkins, he wanted to do the smallest movie possible.
The relationship with the Salkins had soured to the degree that it was going to be almost impossible. I found a wonderful little film I wanted to do called
Inside Moves.
I just got rid of everything.
What a great movie, and what a great move on Dick's part. He said, I want to do the smallest film.
Yeah, the smallest film I could do. It was just a very near and dear to me at that point, and I felt this is going to take my mind totally off of that.
Zack Snyder wanted to do the smallest movie possible. He fucking did one on an iPhone in Snow, Steam, Iron. If you have not seen that, follow him on Vero, create a fucking account. That's basically how we ended up on there. I decided, I need to watch this. How do I do it? Oh, what's Vero? Okay, I guess I'll sign up for it. And then I watched it. And then, all right, yeah, I guess this is somewhat of a cool thing. So that's our introduction to Vero. But it's interesting that these directors have such a connection to these characters that once they're like, fuck, I have to just separate myself, they go into the complete opposite direction. And Donner he goes into some detail of he just wanted to do the most, not basic, but the smallest budget, where he has all the control because was under the microscope. And Snyder essentially did the same exact thing. So kind of going back to the seriousness and Donner's approach to it, another parallel between Donner and Snyder. Even back then, critics were panning Donner's approach to seriousness, stating that Gene Hackman is actually more entertaining under Lester. And even though the funniest part is he didn't shoot anything under Lester, and Tom Mankiewicz actually wrote a letter to the critics stating, that's funny, you should say that Hackman is more entertaining under Lester when he didn't shoot a single fucking thing. So even back then, critics were saying, Donner's too serious with Superman. So think about that.
Holy testicle! Bicycle Tuesday.
Another thing that's kind of interesting about the Donner cut, as the situation moved forward and Warner Brothers gave the okay and Donner's working on this cut, they actually did have a budget. There is a budget set by Warner Brothers to produce the Donner cut.
Nowadays we'd use computer graphics and
To take
even that all out, huh? Why didn't you do it?
We do have a budget.
Huh?
We do have a budget that we try to stick with.
Oh, why?
Yeah, I know.
Smash a
You trying to end your career?
That's kind of interesting. There is a budget to it. So there is a situation where there would be a budget to how much they would actually do for a movie that's already been produced. So it's not like it's unheard of to have additional money go into a DVD production of a movie. It's not unheard of. It's happened, and it just happened not too long ago. And I'm talking about the Donner cut, if that's not on the nose enough for you.
Yeah. So just more interesting things that Donner talks about that are like fascinating parallels. Donner wanted the villains to be a more powerful adversary. He didn't want them to be corny and campy, doing weak shit, basically. And obviously within reason. When you watch the film, you're like, oh man, some of that's kind of dorky. And he goes, did I shoot that? Oh damn, I did shoot that. And as he's doing the commentary, like, oh man, just because of how things were back then, how they had to do, there's no CGI, so how they had to do special effects. But for the most part, he talks a lot about the villains, wanting them to be very powerful. And he speaks a lot about character arcs, whether it's the villains. He talks a lot about Jor-El's and Cal's relationship and how the arc from 1 to 2, how it was supposed to all come together, with Superman or Kal-El wanting to lose his powers for love, kind of interfering that he does in both 1 and 2 with the human race.
Sounds familiar. Sounds like the arc between Pa Kent and the stories that happened with him, even though he's dead. In BVS. And from what we understand, he was supposed to come up in Vision in Justice League as well.
Exactly. And even tying things, as we talked about, I mean, this is all rumor, but the things even with Ma Kent, where, pretend it's an island line in Man of Steel, and that Lois was supposed to say that in Justice League. Again, rumor, but that sounds like something Snyder would do. And it's just very fascinating. And Donner, as he's kind of watching the film and he's talking about in his commentary, he's talking about how by just piecing things together, so they replaced Lara L with Jor-El in Lester's version, so that way they didn't have to pay Marlon Brando. In that, you just completely fuck up the character arc. That then it doesn't become as important and as powerful. So, and in that, Donner talks so much about the importance of the character arcs and some of their dialogue and the things that the characters do being important. And you can tell he was frustrated. I don't know if maybe he's seen the other version or if he's heard things, but he's definitely frustrated with how his movie was taken and changed. And I think that's why Snyder has been putting out all these things on Vero. Because he's probably heard by now all of the things that were changed where he's like, man, that's not my movie. And you're ruining all of these arcs and the growth of these characters and how they were supposed to be.
So again, another point of where the cast is talking about how they felt about the situation. Christopher Reeve said, I think it's appalling when you cut out a major actor like Brando so you don't have to pay him the gross. In my view, the way Superman 2 was produced is the lowest you can go without actually cheating.
Wow.
The cast felt stabbed in the back by the situation. They felt like the producers and WB completely ruined the family unit that they had here.
With Dick Donner, you find things. There's a family to it. Richard Lester came in. There was nothing close to a family atmosphere. There was nothing close to finding out what works and what doesn't work.
Richard Lester came in to do a very complicated gig. He knew we were all in love with Richard Donner. The Sorkins had chosen him because they knew that he was an economic director who could bring things in on budget. So I would imagine he had a shot list of essentials of what the producers needed to finish this bloody movie.
It's so similar. You see Ray Fisher out there with an I Love ZS shirt.
Yep, I was just thinking about that. I wonder if maybe Christopher Reeve was walking around with a I Love Dick shirt or something. Like I love Richard Donner. That's what I was trying to say. Damn, I'm a Christopher Reeve fan too. Did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Oh.
I'm just just thinking of the.
There's just awkward silence on the other end. I don't know. I thought that was so perfect. I love Dick.
Gay.
And he even says, it's one of the funniest things when Richard Donner, he does like this intro before you watch the Donner cut, and you could tell he's like pissed off because he goes by Dick Donner. But he kind of talks about how, apparently that's not appropriate or something to that effect. And he goes, or Richard Donner, I go by Dick, but apparently they don't want you to say that. Something along those lines. It made me laugh.
So then we're going to be a little bit fair to the situation and actually talk about a little bit what necessarily isn't quite a comparison to the Snyder and Donner situation. One of the big two really is, one, from what we know, and what I think is more reasonable to believe compared to a disgruntled jackass on Twitter that says different, Snyder left voluntarily for reasons, very personal reasons. Dick Donner was straight up just fired. He got a Morse code message in Telegram telling him that his services were no longer required. The other big thing is that the Socklins, being the producers and actually the holding the rights to Superman, had all the creative decision. So they are the ones that technically fired Dick Donner, not WB. When it eventually defaulted to WB later on, that's who you had to go through for the Dick Donner cut, not the Socklins. That's a kind of a difference. WB is the rights owner for all these characters when Snyder did it. So when it comes down to the decisions, it still comes back to WB. So those are the big two differences.
Yeah, and obviously a similarity, I guess, would be that they each have different pressures from whoever's overseeing the project. Big difference is, when you look at it, all that Richard Donner is following is Superman 1. Even though there's still a lot of pressure and everything like that and creative control, he's just following Superman 1, which was not critically panned. It did well in the box office, for its time. So you would think the Salkins would back off and say, okay, well, he kind of knows what he's doing. Obviously, by that point, shit had already hit the fan. For Snyder, it's a little bit different. You can tell Warner Brothers want Marvel. They want the Marvel success. So as great as BVS did worldwide, it doesn't break $1 billion, not successful. And I think that's where a lot of the pressures start. In their eyes, exactly. In the eyes of Warner Brothers, and that's where a lot of the pressures start happening. Of we need to pump out $1 billion film, and instead of with both of them, the Salkins and Warner Brothers current day, not understanding the entire scope and not understanding how things were supposed to be planned out. Those are, it's intriguing. So there's pressures. There's just different pressures for different times.
Snyder is under the scope of he needed to have a continuity. Here they're building a universe. Donner was just building a Superman verse. That was it. Having different continuity could be an issue. We would definitely find out someday. I don't know if Warner Brothers really cares about that. I think really in the end they just care about the money. And if they produce a Snyder Cut, they're going to make money. They're going to make a lot more money than they are on current DVD and Blu-ray sales for the current Justice League product.
Mm-hmm.
If they try to do some kind of half-ass thing where they just add some scenes and make basically a longer Whedon cut, I don't think that's going to help. That's not the situation that they want to do. So the continuity issue is a different story. And that's something that we will hopefully eventually find out how much different we're talking here. But ultimately, the story between the Snyder Cut and the Donner Cut is amazingly coincidental. It's amazing how much these stories parallel each other. When you hear the cast, when you hear the situation, when you hear what happened on set, during filming. It's crazy how similar they are. It just seems like Hollywood never changes.
Yeah.
They always panic when they're dealing with a lot of money, because money is king when it comes to Hollywood. And that's always what it's going to be. A lot of people don't make movies for entertainment purposes. They make movies for money purposes.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more to what Matt was saying, I completely agree. It just is, it's so intriguing, the parallels that both of these films have. And it's crazy. It's the same exact studio. It's not even different studios, and history is repeating itself. And as Matt said, it's more about the money and less of the artist's vision and what they want to do, that, in my opinion, eventually would make them money. I think if Richard Donner were to continue with his 5 films, I think they would have done way better than maybe 3 and 4 did of Superman. Not maybe, than 3 and 4 did. Supergirl, they was a kind of a spin-off that the Salkins did as well. Maybe that would be more successful if they decided to do it. Who knows? And I firmly believe that if you had Snyder's version and Snyder's 5 films, that it eventually would have broken the $1 billion mark. But, you know, as Matt said, they want it now. Money is king, and that's the direction that they want to go. And it is going to be intriguing to see where the continuity the continuity goes from here. And if they eventually say, you know what, that the Snyder Cut is canon and the Whedon's cut is just a bonus, or whatever the fuck.
It's an Elseworld story.
Yeah, exactly.
When I see things like that, and I know what that picture could have been, and what Tom and I keep saying Tom because he's so good, and what Tom and I could have continued, the continuing saga of Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder, it would have been quite a series of films.
So I'm going to kind of end this with a couple paragraphs here from theforbiddenzone.com and how they were talking about their campaign for the Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. And it says, so what's the plan? Write to WB and let our voices be heard. Here at the Forbidden Zone, we tried this once before with the DVD release of the collection, in quotations, but this time we've decided to get more organized. We want to bombard the he put the WB with letters all mailed. Mailing children is this thing where you stick an envelope into the mailbox with a stamp. A stamp is this ridiculously overpriced fucking sticky note.
It is. Yeah, pretty much.
That somehow transports your letter from here to across the state or across the country in like 5 days. So,
yeah, you know the Gmail icon, that's a letter. So just so you know.
I wonder how many people don't realize that.
You mean like the save icon is a floppy disk?
Exactly. So it continues, we want to bombard the WB with letters all mailed on the same day, June 19, 2004, in honor of the film's original release date in the U.S. While we're planning a snail mail campaign, more impact, feel free to send emails too. Please join us in our campaign and tell all your friends. Below, we've provided the addresses of the heads of the Time Warner and Warner Home Video. We've also provided a sample letter for you to use, which you can modify it to your own taste if you do it. Please be polite. So, I actually think this is a good way to organize something. I say, on November 17th, 2018, a year from the release of Justice League, I think maybe for us older folks, we'll actually bombard them with snail mail because we know how to write a letterhead.
Yeah, their office assistants are going to be like, what the fuck is this?
That would be so fucking great.
I get all my Amazon packages at work. I have no idea what I'm looking at.
It's like, the fuck, they think Santa's here? Anyway. And I say, you start a campaign now, tell your friends, get everybody to send, or feel free to send emails. Twitter's always a case, but I actually find this to go old school. And if we could actually organize a huge mass mailing, I say it, old school, let's give them some fucking letters, people. You know, get that goddamn college rule paper out and start writing. Writing, not typing. I'm not even talking about typing on the computer. Write. Handwritten notes so they could see all the different people around the world that want to see this movie. I think that would be tremendously awesome. If we don't hear anything by that date, I think this would be one hell of a campaign to produce.
Never give up. Never surrender.
I agree, and very powerful, and hopefully we'll finally send the message of, hey fuckers, we're not messing around. We're sending you
Mr.
letters
Alan
now.
Horn, president and COO of Warner Brothers Entertainment, he's probably dead from cocaine.
Probably. Alan sounds like that name. No offense to any Allens.
Alan Horn sounds like a party name or a porn name. One of the two.
It does.
Gay porn name. Anyway. What the fuck? Alan F. Horn, the Walt Disney Company? As chairman of Walt Disney Company? Alan F. Horn oversees worldwide operations of the Walt Disney Studios, including production and distribution.
Traitor!
This can't be the same guy.
Holy shit. Yeah, it says since 2012. There's a possibility. Wow.
In case I don't see you.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. You're one of very few to make it to the end.
Yes, thank you very much.
Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Comic Movie Marks Podcast and hit the notification bell. You know, all these fucking YouTube channels say this shit, so I'm going to say it now.
Yes, it's perfect. And if you want to hear our full podcast, you can check out our podcast on iTunes or any other podcast subscription service.
Make sure you subscribe. Thanks again.
Yo!